Welcome everyone to today's Power Up. My name is Tom and we have Jen on the line, another customer success manager here at RecDesk to kind of go over today's topic. So we're excited to have everybody. Please remember that if you have any questions throughout the training, I will be moderating the chat. So feel free to drop your questions into the chat and I will collect those and we can ask Jen those questions as they come up. So like I said, today's topic is a league refresher. So our goal is that hopefully after leaving today's training session, you'll feel more comfortable building out a league, as we know some of you may have not done that for a while. So we do have quite a bit on the agenda, but don't worry, Jen is going to do great and go through all those topics one by one. The first thing that she's going to cover is taking an existing program and maybe modifying just the schedule a little bit so that way it better aligns with our leagues. After that, she's going to go over building out a division and team. And then after that, you're actually going to end up scheduling out those teams as playoffs and putting schedules into them. Once that's all created, she'll also show you how you can do playoff dates as well, or maybe even practice dates. And then after that, we're going to finally end with how do you see some of the communication happening amongst the leagues, like amongst your players, your coaches, your captains, or even amongst your team with using our CRM Plus feature. So with that, I'm going to hand this off onto Jen whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Tom. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take over sharing my screen now. Welcome, everyone. So the first area that I like to go over when it comes to leagues is making sure that you know how to set your programs up correctly. Now, one thing I like to bring up in the very beginning for when you build your programs is I firmly believe that in your program, this is where you should break down the category, how you're grouping everyone together. So your 10Us, your 12Us, your 8Us. If you're doing grades, this is a great area to separate that out as well. But this is a better spot to break that information up so that the players list that will automatically fill in when you build a league will be just those who fall into the 10U, the 12U, or whatever category it is that they're registering for. These options for showing the schedule. Now, for a typical sports league, I recommend you uncheck these boxes because the real game schedule is going to be built in the Leagues tab. Now, when we go into the Schedule tab, we'll go over this a little bit further. However, I will add, you do not need to uncheck these boxes if all of 10U practices on the same date, at the same time, at the same area, because you can just manage that particular schedule, the practice schedule, within the program itself. This is the area where it's important to set your age minimums and maximums and the date they need to be that age to fall under that specific category for the age grouping for sports if it's based on age. You can gather quick questions like their t-shirt size, if the parent would like to be a coach or a volunteer. Maybe you want to ask what team they played on last year or if they have any special accommodations. I will also add with this drop-down example, I do recommend for anyone who uses grades to break down your sports, it's a good idea in this drop-down list to ask what grade they're going to be entering or they're part of, depending on what season we're in. Because that way, if the parent accidentally signs their second grader up for the fourth grader group, you'll know right away and you can always transfer the child. The schedule for the program. If you are not going to use your program for the practice schedule, you need to add a single date. That single date should be the last date that you allow in-house registration. So I always make the bad joke. If you shut down registration on the 1st, you know that within 2 weeks, you're going to get somebody coming in who said, oh my God, I missed the deadline. Can you please let my child still play? That's this hard stop date, that you stop allowing those exceptions to occur. Now we'll go over the roster tab in a little bit because that's actually going to connect to the league as well. So now I'm going to pop over to the Leagues tab and I'm going to click Add New League. And here's where I can label it. So I can say that this is Fall Baseball, 10U, Baseball. And then you look for the program that it's connected to. Enter the date that the league starts and the date that you want the league to end. These are obvious options for where you want the information to show and if you want the information to show. Some of you may want to wait to show that information just because you might still be building it and want to wait until everything's entered before the public can see it. You can also write in descriptions and notes. Now, some of our customers have used the description in the notes areas to list who the coaches are and what teams they're associated with, just so that that information is public information. Others have used this area to list who the referees are going to be, especially if they assign a referee to a field or an umpire to a field. Oh no, I need to sneeze. And the next step, you're going to add teams. Now, I always use the example of just typing in team 1 through 4. The reason I do this is if you know the number of teams that are going to be part of your league, then what's going to happen is you can add those teams in first and you can edit them to change the names later, especially if you work off of sponsors and you're not quite sure who your sponsors will be. Now, I did skip a step about division. If you add divisions to your leagues, and I'll go back and show you how to add divisions, you will need to make sure when entering your teams that you enter them to the appropriate division, and that will be a drop-down. And to add divisions on the League Info tab, that's right down here. You'll just want to edit and rename the default one and click Add Division to add the other division. Please keep in mind, especially those of you who do rec and competitive, that these teams are not going to naturally be able to play against one another. You'll have to add in some additional workarounds if you wanted to have, say, the top rec league play one of the competitive teams. So now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to add my teams in. And once you get your teams added, if you know who your coaches are going to be and you've added them to your personnel volunteer list, you can come here and you can assign a coach. You can come in and you can choose who's going to be the coach. You can even choose what division they're connected to. Check this box off if they're the league admin. Now, a league admin could just be the person who agreed to reach out to all parties if, say, a child was to be ill and everyone needed to be notified, or maybe there's bad weather coming and they're in charge of canceling practices. They're going to have access to all the teams. You can also make them a coach associated with a team and then choose their positions and then hit save. Your players list. This is automatically going to fill in because of those who have registered for that specific program. You just need to assign players to the team. So you'll come in here and you'll pick and choose who's going to be on team 1 and assign to team. You can also do player ratings if you use player ratings and assign them to your players. A fun thing to be aware of is on this filter, you can always change the filter to unassigned so that instead of having to look at that big long list, as you're going ahead and putting people into the teams, this list will just become smaller. So that when you get to the end, you can select all and assign them to the last team. When you change the filter back to any of the other settings to to filter through, you'll be able to see you've lost no one, but you've now got your teams all assigned. This does not need to be done first. I'm just going in tab order going across. This can always be the very last step of assigning the players to the team. The next is to go to your schedule tab and then click on edit schedule. You must click select locations and enter the locations that you're going to be using during practice. Please keep in mind that if you use facilities that are not your own, such as Board of Education buildings, especially those of you who may use middle school or high school basketball courts as part of your league, you will want to add them to the facilities tab. Just don't show them on the calendar or show their hours. And I do recommend in the description to just say that this is for programming purposes only. That way, if anyone on the public goes, hey, how come you have the high school listed as one of your facilities? They can just click in and see, oh, it's just because you have programs that occur at the high school. Then you'll set your default game duration and hit set. This needs to be done before you can add individual games or using the auto scheduler. Adding individual games may be useful for those of you who have a very complicated scheduling process due to people's work schedules. This would allow you to say, well, because of their work schedules, team 1 and team 2, they can't do their first game until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And you can assign them to a field. And you can manually build your schedule this way. For those of you who have a simpler schedule, you can go to the auto scheduler. And these are the options that are going to pop up. The first one you'll see is the number of times teams play each other. If you are using an odd number of teams, this is going to be the only option you will see. This is also a useful option if you need everybody to play against one another a certain number of times, and you need a certain number of bye weeks to happen for each team. If you have an odd number of teams, so you know you're going to have a bye week for each team, when you're using this option, still use this one, but in the Teams tab, add a fake team called bye week. That way the system will schedule those for you, and it'll automatically assign one bye week per team. You can also say that each team plays the same number of games. Maybe we want them to play 6 games over the course of a season. You can limit them to 1 game per day. So something like 10U, that's probably 10U rec, that's probably going to be the case. But if you do tournament weekends or tournament time periods, you can use the fill all available time slots. Many of my groups that do pickleball or disc golf or things of that nature, the fill all available time slots tends to come in handy. On this next screen, what you're going to be doing is choosing the pattern. So if my games are going to start on the 19th and the very last game is going to be on Halloween, I can put my end date and my start date. And then what I want to do is say that my first game is going to be at 12 o'clock on field 3, and it's going to happen every week, and it's going to be every Saturday, and I'll also add in Sunday schedule. There's other repeat patterns here that you can change, and you can click through and use. And then when you click add time slots, it's going to add time slots for all those dates that fall in that pattern. To add time slots for another facility, let's just say field 4 is going to be used, but for some reason you can't have games on field 4 till 1:30. We can go ahead, change it to field 4 and say 1:30 for a start time. And that'll give us our 2 fields with our 2 different start times. Now this screen is what I recommend you pause on. If any of these dates, you know your facility or that field is going to be shut down, there's no practices, maybe there's a holiday, or you know that the fields are going to have a huge maintenance thing done on them that day, what you would just do is click on this actions button and either reschedule them to another date or remove all days time slots. This will make it so the system doesn't think those dates are available for games during the next process, which is just hitting the next step. So you can create the schedule now, click here to go there. And the system has scheduled your team with all of your games for the season. And you can click on Edit Schedule to keep the score. So after the first game is over, you can click Edit and you can put the final score in here. The system will post the final score not only on the community site, but it's also going to start recording the standings for who won and who lost, as well as ties. Now, for those of you who do brackets, maybe such as basketball, where you have the top 4 teams play against one another and then the top 2 teams. The way that you want to add those in is create this schedule first. Create the actual team schedule, and then go to the Teams tab and add something that could be used as a placeholder. And you want to create 2 just so you can have them play against one another. And for your playoffs, that's when you go in, and that was the last game, so then I can come in and I can say, all right, so the Sunday after is going to be our playoff games. So we'll have the placeholder set up, and we'll say that the first game is at noon still on field 3. And you'll see that that will add those placeholder dates and times. And you just want to add all of those playoff games or final games so that you're blocking the time. And what you'll want to do is when you know who's going to be the top teams, click Edit and choose them from the drop-down. That will automatically update those teams' schedule, as well as make it very public for who's going on to the next level and who's going to be playing in those games. Within here, you would be able to click on Print Schedule or Delete Entire Schedule. Please be aware that if you think you're going to have 4 teams when you make the schedule and a team drops out, if you don't rename it to use it as a bi-week type of option, you will need to delete the entire schedule to remove a team. If the team has any scheduled dates for it, it will not allow you to delete it out. But once everything is all made, the nice thing is you can come into the team itself and you can print specific team information or contact that specific team via email or text. One thing to note is we did just add a feature so that the coach's email address and cell phone number, if they've opted in for text message alerts, will be included in these notifications. So it's not just going to be the team members. Or you can go to the Leagues tab and you can reach out to the entire league from here. Now, before I move on to show you what the coach access looks like, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do have one question that came in, but you might be covering it during this coach section. But someone wants to know, how can they do a background check on a coach and store that in the system?
So background checks for coaches are actually going to be part of their profiles, their personnel volunteer list profiles. So on your admin tab, personnel volunteer list, you can add documents. Please keep in mind, it may be beneficial to go to manage custom lists and manage document types so that you can add a background check option in. The reason I recommend that here is because you can choose a pattern for how long that document is good for. So once you've added that option on the personnel volunteer list, you're going to be able to go to your personnel volunteer, attach a new document, choose background check as an option, and if it's set for 1 year or 2 years, it's going to automatically pull that date in. Please keep in mind, if you're entering it late, you can always backdate it to the real expiration date. You can also just check this box off that says that you have it on file, especially those of you who may use a background check site that just keeps all of your cleared background checks on file for you, or you have paper files. You can just check this box off. If you wanted to keep the physical results, you would just choose the local file from your drive and it would be able to be saved here. Now, one thing to keep in mind that I forgot to go over with the leagues piece, and I'm just going to pause here for one more second before I pop over to the instructor login. Many of you have asked us the best way to list your practices, and there's a lot of ways you can do it. I mentioned earlier that you can do the practice schedule on the program itself. Of course, you can always do a reservation for the team and for the coach to block off the dates and times they're going to be using. But if you wanted it to be visible on the community member's household calendar, not the calendar button, but their household calendar once they're logged in, you can come here and you can add a second league based on the same program. That's the practice schedule. And you can create practice schedules per team, and that will connect to their household. Now, keep in mind, you do need to have at least 2 teams to add any schedule dates on the leagues tab, on the league scheduling tab. So a lot of times my groups are just creating 2 teams, and they're calling one the actual team name, and then the other team that they're creating is just called practice. They can just list that information. Were there any other quick questions before I go over to the community site, Tom?
Not that I can see right now.
Perfect. All right, so on the community site, your instructors, when they sign in, they have this additional login, and they're going to be able to log in and view their league. Now, this is completely mobile friendly, so they're going to be able to view their league's roster. If they're the team admin or league admin, they can filter per team. They can reach out to each team member or each team as well, or they can export the information to Excel. If they click on someone's profile, it does give them information that's part of their profile, such as their address, their contact number, and emergency contact information. Now, this is one method of communication. Now, this is strictly meant for your coaches, especially your parent coaches. Over on this side, if you have other information that you need to get through to your staff, you can use our CRM Plus feature, where you can write in a note about the league, add in documents pertinent to the league, or you can assign tasks. So let's just say you have one person who needs to review the schedule. You can come in and say that you have another staff member to verify the correct players are assigned to each team. And you would just choose the person from the drop-down box who's going to be the one checking the information, set a due date if this needs to be done by a certain date, and notify the user via email. That way, your staff is going to be able to easily communicate within your league's piece. Do we have any other questions for today?
Not that I can see, but yep, not that I can see.
Perfect. So we'll go ahead and we'll leave this meeting room open for a few more minutes in case any other questions come in. But thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.